The first sign of the invasion was not fire or destruction. It was silence. A deep, unnatural quiet that smothered the world like a suffocating veil. It started with the stars. One by one, familiar constellations vanished, swallowed by an encroaching void. At first, astronomers thought it was some cosmic anomaly, a once-in-a-lifetime event. But then came the disruptions, radio signals fizzled out, satellites went dark, and global networks collapsed. Scientists scrambled for explanations. Governments assured the public it was temporary. They were wrong. Then, the black ships arrived. They materialized in orbit, vast and featureless, absorbing all light. These obsidian behemoths did not announce their presence with grand displays of power. They simply were. For 24 hours, the world watched in terrified anticipation, unsure whether to run or pray. Cities emptied, people hid, and defenses mobilized. When the attack came, it was surgical. No fiery explosions. No nuclear devastation. Just precision. Entire city districts collapsed in eerie silence, buildings dissolving into dust as pulses of unseen energy reduced them to their base elements. The planet's mightiest army stood ready, but they were unprepared for an enemy that did not march, did not declare war, only exterminated. And then, they descended. The Akalari. They were unlike any alien nightmares imagined in books or films. No grotesque features, no monstrous claws. They were precise, elegant in their horror. Towering, jointed figures with shifting metallic skin that reflected the environment around them like liquid mercury. Their faces were featureless plates, save for a single slit of glowing light that pulsed as they scanned their surroundings. And they did not seek resources. They did not target the strong. They came for the innocents. Children. The elderly. The defenseless. Across the world, entire orphanages were emptied, hospitals left eerily abandoned, homes raided in the dead of night. Surveillance footage, what little remained, showed the Akalari moving with unsettling purpose, scanning their victims before whisking them away in columns of crackling energy. No deaths, no bloodshed. Just disappearance. But humanity's nightmare was only beginning. In a remote Nevada town, beneath the ruins of a collapsed farmhouse, a mother clutched her daughter against her chest, her breath ragged with fear. The scent of scorched earth filled her lungs, the air thick with dust. Overhead, the distant hum of an Akalari patrol ship sent an icy shiver through her spine. The little girl whimpered, her tiny fingers tightening around her mother's torn sleeve. "Mommy, are they coming?" She stroked the child's tangled hair, forcing a reassuring smile. "Not if we stay quiet, baby. Not if we stay hidden." It was a lie. The Akalari never stopped. They combed through every home, every ruin. When they scanned for life, they always found it. A metallic shriek pierced the air, and her heart slammed against her ribs. Something moved outside. A shadow, shifting against the pale light of the fires burning in the distance. The house trembled as something heavy stepped onto the debris-strewn floorboards. A dark figure loomed over the ruins, its elongated limbs clicking against the rubble as it searched. The Akalari's featureless mask pulsed with a faint glow, scanning, its gaze sweeping over the wreckage. It stopped. The mother held her breath. "Please, please don't see us." Then, her daughter whimpered. Just the smallest, softest sound. It was enough. The alien froze. The pulsing light on its mask flickered rapidly as it locked onto them. The mother's blood turned to ice. She knew she had only seconds before she and her daughter would be taken. And then, something else moved. A blur of motion. A pulse of energy screamed through the air. Before the Akalari could react, its sleek body jerked, a jagged blue arc sliced across its torso, and an instant later, it was ripped in half. The body collapsed, twitching. The mother gasped, pulling her daughter closer as another figure emerged from the shadows. He stood tall amidst the wreckage, his presence commanding and alien in its own way. Dark, battle-worn armor covered his body, its plating scarred from countless battles. His movements were eerily fluid, too precise to be entirely human. Two searing points of electric blue light glowed beneath a heavy hood, boring into her with unreadable intensity. He wasn't one of them. But he wasn't one of us, either. Then, he lifted his blade. An impossibly sleek weapon, its edges shimmering as though shifting between dimensions. He pointed beyond the wreckage. More Akalari were coming. The Sentinel, if that's what he was, did not hesitate. He moved like a wraith, his blade cutting through the air faster than her eyes could follow. The first Akalari barely had time to react before its head separated from its body, sparks erupting as it collapsed. The second lashed out with a crackling energy whip, but the Sentinel caught it mid-air, twisted it back, and drove his blade through the creature's chest. One by one, the Akalari fell, collapsing in heaps of severed limbs and shattered exoskeletons. When the last enemy lay still, the Sentinel turned to her. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, he knelt. Placing a gauntleted hand against the ground, he closed his glowing eyes. A faint hum rippled through the earth as if scanning. The air vibrated, and for the first time, the mother noticed the metallic rings embedded in his armor, ancient, inscribed with symbols that pulsed with unreadable energy. Finally, he spoke. More will come. His voice was low, mechanical, yet undeniably human. She could only stare. The Sentinel stood, turned away from the bodies of the fallen Akalari, and stepped forward as if they were nothing but discarded husks. Before vanishing into the ruins, he spoke again. Run. And then, he was gone. The mother shuddered, clutching her daughter tightly. For the first time since the invasion began, the hunters had met something unexpected. Something stronger. Something unknown. And for the first time in days, she felt the smallest flicker of hope. The Sentinel had come. The Sentinel moved like a shadow through the ruins, his every step precise, silent. The world had already begun its descent into chaos, but he did not waver. He had seen such destruction before. He had been destruction before. Now, he was something else. The mother and child he had saved would not be the last. Across the fractured remains of civilization, humanity teetered on the brink of extinction. The Akalari were winning. They had come prepared, had studied human weakness, had struck where they knew resistance would crumble. But they had not anticipated him. In the depths of what was once a military black site, 3 survivors huddled in a command bunker. Their faces were drawn, gaunt from hunger and fear. The screens before them flickered with static, the last remnants of a global defense network that had failed catastrophically. "They're taking more than just people," muttered a woman, her voice barely above a whisper. Captain Helena Graves, one of the few remaining U.S. military officers still coordinating any kind of resistance, studied the fragmented transmissions on the screen. Cities had fallen. Military bases erased. Entire populations vanished. Major Ethan Vance, a grizzled veteran with a cybernetic arm, clenched his jaw. "They're not just invading. He hesitated, as if saying it out loud would make it worse. "They're harvesting." Dr. Elias Carter, the team scientist, pushed up his cracked glasses. "We still don't know why. But we need to find out. Before there's no one left." A sharp beep interrupted them. A sensor alert. Vance lunged forward. "Proximity breach. We have movement topside." Helena grabbed her rifle, her heart hammering. "Akalari?" Carter checked the readings. "No, something else." The bunker's emergency lights flickered as a silhouette appeared on their external cameras. A lone figure. Cloaked. Armored. Moving with purpose through the wreckage. Vance narrowed his eyes. What the hell? The camera feed crackled, and suddenly, as if aware it was being watched, the figure looked directly into the lens. 2 electric blue eyes glowed through the darkness. Then, the screen cut to black. Helena, Vance, and Carter stood in tense silence as the main blast door creaked open. The emergency lighting flickered, casting jagged shadows against the steel walls. Then he stepped inside. The Sentinel. He moved with an eerie grace, the battle-worn plating of his armor reflecting the dim glow of the bunker lights. He was taller than any of them, his presence both imposing and enigmatic. He carried no visible firearm, only a blade, sleek, deadly, and humming with a power none of them could comprehend. Vance instinctively raised his weapon. "Stay right there." The Sentinel did not flinch. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward. Helena placed a steadying hand on Vance's arm. "Wait." The Sentinel's glowing eyes flickered slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, mechanical, yet disturbingly human. "I know what they are doing." The room tensed. Helena narrowed her eyes. "And what exactly is that?" The Sentinel's gaze moved between them, as if measuring their resolve. Then, he spoke words that sent ice through their veins. "They are not killing your people." A heavy silence. Helena's grip on her rifle tightened. "We know that. They're taking them. But why?" The Sentinel took another step forward, his armor humming softly with each movement. "They are not taking them." He let the word settle before adding, "They are transforming them." Vance stiffened. "What?" Carter looked pale. "You're saying they're altering humans?" The Sentinel nodded. "I have seen it. I have stopped it. But I cannot do so alone. Helena took a deep breath. You fought them before. A long pause. Then, yes. Vance wasn't convinced. Who the hell are you? The Sentinel hesitated. For a brief moment, something flickered across his glowing eyes, an emotion too quick to decipher. Then, his answer came, and it was not what they expected. I was the first. A chill ran through the bunker. Carter swallowed. The first, what? The Sentinel tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether or not to reveal the truth. Then he said it. The first to escape. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of his words. Vance was the first to break the silence. You're saying, you were one of them? The Sentinel did not deny it. I was taken. Changed. Forged into something new. His voice carried no emotion, only certainty. But they did not break me. Helena studied him. Why? The Sentinel turned toward her. Because I remembered who I was. Another beat of silence. Then. I remembered humanity. Carter ran a shaky hand through his hair. If they're changing people, then that means, he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Helena finished it for him. Then they can still be saved. The Sentinel nodded. If you act now. Vance exhaled sharply. We don't even have weapons that can scratch those bastards. What do you expect us to do? The Sentinel reached to his belt, retrieving a small, shimmering device. He placed it on the table, and it instantly unfolded into a holographic display. Images, schematics, data beyond human comprehension. And at the center of it all, a facility. A massive structure, hidden within the shadows of the Akalari's orbiting fleet. Pulsing. Thrumming with life. This, the Sentinel said, is where they are kept. Helena leaned forward. Our people. The Sentinel nodded. Their transformation is not yet complete. If you reach them in time, you can still bring them back. Carter's hands shook as he studied the data. This tech, it's impossible. The Sentinel met his gaze. It is the only chance you have. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Helena straightened, determination hardening her features. Then we move. Vance groaned. This is suicide. Maybe. Helena turned to the Sentinel. But if you're right, then we have a mission. The Sentinel's glowing eyes pulsed. Then, for the first time, he nodded. Then we fight. And with that, humanity's first strike against the Akalari began. The stolen Akalari transport shot through the dark skies, its sleek hull reflecting the eerie glow of the orbiting mothership. Within its cramped interior, Helena Graves adjusted the straps on her tactical vest, feeling the weight of the mission pressing against her ribs. They had one shot at this. Vance sat across from her, checking the charge on his pulse rifle. His cybernetic fingers twitched slightly, a nervous tick he never used to have. I still think this is insane, he muttered. Carter, crouched over a holographic map, barely looked up. It is, he said, but it's also our best chance. The Sentinel stood near the rear of the cabin, silent as always. His glowing blue eyes scanned their stolen ship's readouts, his mind likely processing variables none of them could even comprehend. Helena swallowed. This facility, she said, directing her words at him, what are we walking into? The Sentinel turned his gaze to her. A crucible, he said simply. No one spoke after that. The moment the transport breached the outer perimeter of the Akalari facility, alarms shrieked through the air. The Sentinel had warned them this wouldn't be a stealth mission for long. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the enemy responded. The doors hissed open, and the four of them surged forward into the massive, dimly lit structure. The walls pulsed with a faint, organic glow. The air was thick, humid, wrong, as if the facility itself were alive. Helena pressed forward, rifle raised. Carter, where are we going? Carter's wrist device projected a flickering map. Main containment sector. If the Sentinel's data is right, the prisoners should still be there. Vance swept his weapon across the eerie hall. Unless they've already been turned into one of those things. No one answered. The team moved fast, sticking to the shadows, avoiding patrols of towering Akalari sentinels. These were not the standard foot soldiers they had seen before. Their bodies were encased in biomechanical armor, and their movements were unnervingly precise. The Sentinel led the way, his blade drawn, his presence a silent promise of violence. And then, they found them. Rows upon rows of chambers, filled with humans, hundreds, maybe thousands, suspended in thick, translucent liquid. Their eyes were open, unblinking, their bodies writhing as if trapped in a nightmare. A deep, inhuman hum vibrated through the chamber. The transformation process had already begun. Carter paled. "Oh my God." Vance clenched his jaw. "Can we still stop it?" The Sentinel stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the grotesque machinery. "Yes." Helena turned to him. "How?" The Sentinel reached toward a pulsating control panel. "By waking them up." Then he plunged his hand into the interface. The facility screamed. The moment the Sentinel's hand connected, every chamber burst open. Bodies spilled onto the cold floor, gasping, shuddering, changing. Some had barely been altered, wide-eyed, disoriented survivors coughing up the strange fluid. Others were less fortunate. Their limbs elongated, their skin darkened into obsidian plating. Their mouths opened in soundless wails. And then, their eyes snapped to the humans. Vance cursed. "They're waking up wrong." The first mutated prisoner lunged, its elongated fingers curving into razor-sharp claws. Helena dropped it with 3 precise shots to the chest, but the body barely staggered before it kept coming. "Shit," she shouted. The Sentinel moved faster than any of them could see. His blade sang through the air, severing the creature's head in a single, fluid motion. But there were dozens of them. The room erupted into chaos. Helena fired round after round, Carter scrambled to access the facility's control systems, and Vance activated a defensive drone that barely held the creatures back. The Sentinel was a force of nature, his blade slicing through enemies with merciless efficiency. But even he could not be everywhere at once. "We need to fall back," Vance shouted, taking down another transformed human with a brutal strike. Carter yelled over the commotion. "I can shut down the transformation process, but I need time." Helena turned to the Sentinel. "Cover him." The Sentinel nodded. He moved to Carter's side, his blade flashing as he cut down anything that came too close. More and more prisoners broke free, some fully human, others something else entirely. Then, the air rippled. And the Akalari finally arrived. A massive figure descended from above, its body shifting like liquid metal, its many burning eyes locking onto them. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a warden. The ground shook as it landed. Its voice was a low, reverberating growl, filled with malice and something worse, recognition. "Traitor," it hissed. The Sentinel froze. The warden's head tilted. "You think we did not know you would come back?" The Sentinel's grip on his blade tightened. "I am not one of you anymore." The warden's laughter was a nightmare. "You never stopped being one of us." It moved faster than anything that size should have been able to. One moment it stood still, the next, it collided with the Sentinel, sending him crashing through a wall. "Sentinel!" Helena shouted, but she had no time to react. The warden turned on them next. A blast of energy erupted from its body, knocking Carter and Vance off their feet. Helena barely had time to dive behind cover before the warden raised one massive, clawed hand, aiming directly at her. Then, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Enough." The Sentinel rose from the rubble. His blue eyes burned brighter than ever. His armor, once sleek and contained, shifted, revealing intricate, living mechanisms beneath. Helena's breath caught. For the first time, she realized. The Sentinel wasn't just resisting the Akalari. He was evolving beyond them. The warden hesitated. "What have you done?" The Sentinel vanished. A blur of motion. A flash of light. And suddenly, the warden reeled backward, its arm severed at the joint. The Sentinel landed in front of Helena. "Finish the mission," he commanded. Then, he charged the warden again. Helena didn't hesitate. She grabbed Carter by the collar, dragging him toward the control panel. "Shut it down, now." Carter's fingers flew over the interface. Almost there. Vance covered their flank, cutting down the last of the transformed prisoners. "Hurry up, Carter." The Sentinel and the warden clashed in a battle that shook the facility. Sparks flew, metal screeched, the air itself trembled from their blows. Then, Carter slammed his fist on the console. "I got it." A deep, resounding pulse filled the chamber. The transformation pods shattered, and the remaining prisoners stopped changing. The warden roared. It knew what had just happened. It had lost. The Sentinel drove his blade through its skull. The warden fell. Helena barely had time to process their victory before the Sentinel turned to them. "We need to leave. Now." Alarms blared. The facility was collapsing. And deep in the void above, the Akalari fleet had begun to move. The facility trembled, its structure collapsing around them. Sirens howled, warning of imminent implosion. Fire and steam burst from cracked machinery, and the air shimmered with unstable energy fields. Helena grabbed Carter and yanked him away from the control panel. Move! Vance cleared the path ahead, firing into the last of the Akalari forces trying to stop them. The Sentinel, his armor now thrumming with barely contained energy, led the way. Behind them, the Warden's lifeless body twisted and warped, dissolving into a pool of writhing, blackened matter. Even in death, the Akalari refused to simply fall. The stolen transport waited at the outer docking bay, just beyond the facility's main corridor. But as they raced through the crumbling halls, the Sentinel suddenly halted. Helena skidded to a stop. "What the hell are you doing? We have to go." The Sentinel's glowing blue eyes flickered, processing something none of them could see. Then, he turned to her. "They know." The word sent ice through her veins. "The fleet," the Sentinel said. "They are moving toward Earth." Carter paled. "You mean, they're not retreating?" "No," the Sentinel said. "This was never their endgame. This facility was only a fraction of their plan. The transformation was only the beginning." Helena clenched her fists. "Then we stop them." The Sentinel stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "The command ship," he said. "If we take it down, we break their coordination. Without their network, the rest of the fleet will falter." Vance reloaded his rifle. "Then let's steal ourselves a goddamn warship." The stolen transport shot into the dark expanse of space, weaving through the Akalari fleet. Hundreds of warships hovered above Earth, their massive forms eclipsing the planet below. Energy currents pulsed between them, creating an interwoven network, a hive mind guiding the invasion. At the center of it all loomed the command ship, a towering construct of obsidian metal and shifting, living architecture. Helena gripped the controls. "How do we get inside?" The Sentinel stood near the viewport, his eyes fixed on the warship. "The way I did before." The transport's exterior shimmered, its stolen Akalari cloaking field activating. They drifted closer, bypassing the smaller vessels undetected, until they reached the command ship's docking bay. Helena exhaled. "If they figure us out, we're dead." The Sentinel turned to them. "Then let us make every second count." The doors hissed open. They moved quickly, cutting down the guards at the entrance before slipping deeper into the ship's interior. The walls breathed, shifting with an unnatural rhythm. The further they went, the more the structure felt alive. Carter shuddered. "This place is wrong." The Sentinel did not respond. His focus was ahead, toward the core nexus. The heart of the Akalari network. Their final target. The chamber pulsed with an unnatural light. A massive structure rose from the center, an organic machine, tendrils of dark matter extending into the ship's walls. At its core, a shifting entity hovered, its form constantly twisting, morphing between something almost human and something utterly alien. Helena's blood went cold. "What the hell is that?" The Sentinel stepped forward. Their will made manifest. The hive mind. The entity's many eyes opened. "You cannot stop what has already begun," it whispered. Then the entire ship came alive. The battle was instant, brutal. Tendrils lashed out from the walls, striking with lethal precision. Vance barely dodged one before firing a pulse round that severed it mid-strike. Carter frantically hacked the control systems, trying to disrupt the ship's defenses. "I need more time." Helena fired at the hive mind, but her bullets dissolved before reaching it. The Sentinel lunged. His blade met the hive mind's form, but instead of striking flesh, he collided with a maelstrom of shifting energy. The hive mind laughed. "You are not free," it whispered to the Sentinel. "You are still one of us." For a brief second, the Sentinel hesitated. And in that moment, a tendril impaled him through the chest. "No!" Helena screamed. The Sentinel didn't fall. His body shuddered, his blue eyes flickering wildly. The hive mind pressed in. "Do you feel it? The call of your creators." The Sentinel gritted his teeth. His blue glow turned white-hot. Then, he grabbed the tendril impaling him, and ripped it free. "I am more than what you made me." The hive mind reeled back, and for the first time, it looked afraid. The Sentinel exploded forward, his energy surging beyond anything they had seen before. His blade became light itself, cleaving through the hive mind's form. Helena turned to Carter. "Now." Carter slammed his fist onto the control panel. "Purging the core." The hive mind screamed. Its entire form collapsed inward, its network severed. The ship shook violently, its very fabric unraveling. The Sentinel staggered back, his body flickering, unstable. Vance grabbed Helena. "We have to go." The transport was already primed for takeoff. They sprinted for the exit, Carter barely making it as the corridor collapsed behind him. The Sentinel stood at the threshold, looking back at the dying hive mind. Helena turned. "Come on." But the Sentinel didn't move. His body flickered again, energy surging uncontrollably. Then, his eyes met Helena's. "You must survive." And with one final motion, he threw them onto the transport, the doors slamming shut behind them. "No." Helena pounded against the glass. "Sentinel." But he was already turning back. Standing alone in the collapsing warship. And as the transport blasted away, they saw him raise his blade one last time. Before the entire command ship detonated in a blinding explosion of light. The Akalari fleet fractured. With their network destroyed, they turned to chaos. Earth's remaining defenses struck back, taking advantage of the disarray. The invasion collapsed. Humanity had won. But at a cost. Helena stood at the shattered remnants of a battlefield, staring up at the burning sky. The war was over. The world had survived. But he was gone. Carter approached. "He saved us all." Helena clenched her fists. "Yeah." She exhaled sharply. "And we're going to make sure no one ever forgets it." Above them, the remnants of the Akalari fleet drifted, silent, broken. And somewhere, in the void beyond, a new light flickered. The war was over. But the legend of the Sentinel had only just begun.